You know, one of the things that I like about working at Woodsmith magazine is that we get introduced to a lot of people that are just picking up this hobby that we all enjoy. And inevitably, a lot of the same questions pop up time and time again from beginning woodworkers. And one of those is about sharpening. And I kind of understand this because when you start looking at sharpening, there's a ton of options out there on how to sharpen your tools. Personally, I started with sandpaper on a granite slab. That's what's commonly referred to as the scary sharp method. And it worked really well, and honestly, it was probably one of the lowest cost of entries to start sharpening my own hand tools. And from there, I moved into water stones, which I also really liked. And finally, I've settled on some oil stones because they're compact and I can bring them with me when I am doing seminars at other places rather than the office or my shop. But let's talk about scary sharp real quick, and that is sandpaper sharpening. So when you hear scary sharp, generally somebody is referring to sandpaper that's usually a wet and dry sandpaper, so a lot of times it will have a cloth back, and you're putting that on a flat surface. Now that flat surface can be one of many things. Like I said, mine was a marble slab. A lot of people will use a piece of plate glass or a cast iron wing on their table saw, or even a couple layers of MDF, and that's perfectly flat for sharpening most things. But we have one solution here at Woodsmith Magazine that takes scary sharp to a whole new level. Let me show you. So this guy is basically a work sharp. If you ever heard of work sharp, it's a sharpening system that has a small table that turns with a bar to register your tool against. However, this one's a little different because it's powered by your drill press. And I like this one in particular compared to the work sharp for a couple of reasons. First, because it's powered by the drill press, we can change the speed on it. So we can have the plate spin really fast or really slow. Also, I like the fact that I can simply pop off the disc and I can change it to a disc of different grit. So I can have a bunch of these ready and I don't have to waste time peeling it off and worrying about a pressure sensitive adhesive on the back of the sharpening pad. And the other thing I like about this is that the turntable here that holds the sandpaper is a little bit bigger than the work sharp system. The work sharp system tends to be a little bit smaller, and I found it tends to be a little bit faster than I would like. Now I bought a work sharp system right after I started getting into hand tools, mainly to flatten backs of hand plane blades or chisels, and I found that it's pretty quick and it can remove a lot of metal quickly, which can kind of get you in a precarious situation if you're not paying real close attention. So let's go ahead and get this chucked up in the drill and we'll see how it works. All right, before we start using this thing, let's look at the construction of it. Now this thing's pretty simple, even though it may not seem like it. We simply have a plywood case here, and the case really doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, it gives us the location to attach some of these accessories, but the insides are what really matter. And we have this stainless steel shaft that's connected to a pulley, and that is connected to another pulley that is below this disc. Those are connected by a belt, and on top here we have a 2-layer thick MDF top that has the centering rod, which is the mate to this guy. Then it has another little indexing rod that attaches to the bottom side of these platens. Up here we have a flipping stop that is basically our tool rest. So this gives us a place to position our tool. And over here we have a gauge to set the protrusion on our tool in relation to the tool holder. So that's how we set our bevel angle. So for this guy, I've set it up there right at about 20 degrees. Now this is a new to me chisel, so I'm not sure what the angle is going to be, but I think 20 degrees will work pretty well. Once you have your tool clamped in, you can then hold that against the rod here and use that to position the tool and sharpen it back and forth. Now I've clamped this entire assembly down to the tabletop. That's just to keep it from walking anywhere. There's one other thing that I like to have, no matter what type of sharpening I'm doing with sandpaper, whether it is this system, a scary sharp system, or even using a work sharp, I like to have a little bit of lubrication on hand. And what I use is simply Windex. It works well, it's cheap, usually have it. Water works well also, but I find Windex tends to be a little bit more slippery and just works a little bit better in my opinion. So let's go ahead and check the speed on this guy. I think that's a little bit faster than I want, so I'm going to turn the speed down a little bit. All right, that is so much better. So we're going to go fairly slow on here. I'm going to think I'm about, let's call it about 200 RPM. And I believe that's about a 1-to-1. So we're going about 200 RPM here as well. And because I am starting this chisel off fresh, I'm going to start with one of the coarsest grits we have. And on this one, it's 120 grit. And then we will go to each of these successive grits, which happens to be, it looks like 320, 600, 800, and we'll work our way up to a leather strop. So what we're going to do is position our tool rest. We're going to start with the disc turning. I'm going to register the chisel off of the steel bar, and then I'm going to rock it down until the bevel comes in contact with the disc. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure to cover this surface with Windex or whatever you decide to use for lubrication, and that's going to carry away any metal particles coming from the chisel. It doesn't keep our sandpaper free and ensure it cuts. But if we do notice that it starts to cut fairly slowly, not as aggressively as we would like, these discs simply peel off. They're pressure sensitive adhesive on the backside, so you can pull it off, throw it away, slap a new one on there. So I'm going to go ahead and get this lubed up. I'm going to mark my bevel with a Sharpie just to gauge my progress, and I'm going to throw some safety glasses on and get sharpening. Okay, so you can see there that we've basically reground that whole bevel. And because this is an antique chisel, that edge wasn't real square how I got it, so it took a lot of more material off one side than the other, but I'm keeping an eye on that as I'm sharpening and putting pressure where I need to bring the bevel back into square to the rest of the chisel. Now, I'm pretty much through this grit. We can tell that because it's all shiny all the way across. I have a little bit up here, but I'm going to add a micro bevel to this anyways, so I'm not terribly concerned about that little corner that hasn't been touched yet. So we can go ahead and switch this over to a finer grit. And it is as simple as pulling that disc off, throwing a new one on here, and doing that same thing all over again. And one thing I should mention, if you've sharpened anything by hand, you'll know that when an edge starts to get sharp, you'll feel a burr on the backside. And it's no different on this system, especially if you're sharpening on the side that's coming at you. It's pushing the metal back towards the chisel, and it's actually rolling a really nice burr off this back edge. And I can feel that pretty much all the way across. So what I'll do before I start on this grit is I'll hit this back side just real quick to flatten that burr off, and then we'll sharpen this bevel again until we get a burr on the back side. All right, once we've established our primary bevel, and we went through that first step of that really rough 120 grit sandpaper, Each successive grit is going to take just a couple of seconds. That all told is maybe 15 seconds on this one, and we'll switch to the next one. This is 600 grit. Now at this point, I'm not going to worry about marking the bevel anymore because I know it's established perfectly for the height that we have here. And now the next grit. All right, so as I'm working up these grits, I'm keeping an eye on that main bevel. And each grit I go up, the edge gets a little shinier and a little shinier. And you can really tell where the current grit, which is finer than the previous grit, is removing the scratch marks from that previous grit. So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm making sure I can feel that burr on the back side of the chisel. And once I feel that, I'm going to hit it on the back of the chisel real quick, just to remove that burr, and then I'll go to the next grit. And with this 2000 grit pad, we're really just giving a polish before we get our stropping disc on here. So that should be enough. Okay, and I feel a little bit of burr on the back, so we're going to go ahead and hit that quick. Okay, I'll set this off to the side. And you'll notice I'm not returning these back to the holder. I just like to let them sit there for a couple minutes, let all that Windex evaporate off so we're not getting them in there and getting Windex all over. But now we can go to the stropping disc. And this is just a leather disc that has some stropping compound applied to it. And you'll see that this really, really polishes this edge up. Okay, and it doesn't take real long on the stropping wheel. And we have a mirror polish on that bevel. Excuse me while I check my reflection quick, because that is shiny. You'll notice when I was stropping that, I moved to the opposite side of the wheel. With the stropping wheel, because it is a soft leather, we don't want to be pushing down, and we're actually going to shave off that leather. So with this wheel, I'll switch over and just come over to this side. So let's take a look at that bevel. You can see that's polished, it's sharp, it's razor sharp. I could probably shave with that if I wanted to. And it's pretty much ready to go. So I might dare say that this may be one of the easiest ways to sharpen your hand tools in your shop. Now, of course, you do have to build it. And if you want the plans, they're available on woodsmithplans.com. Otherwise, we'll leave a link in the description below for where you can purchase these plans, and you'll be glad you did, because all of a sudden, all the tools in your shop that were once dull, they'll be razor sharp.
Woodsmithplans.com. Hundreds of professional, high-quality woodworking plans right at your fingertips. Every single plan is presented as an easy-to-download digital package that includes pages of step-by-step instructions, full-color photos, illustrations, and exploded views, retail sources for hardware and supplies, plus a cutting diagram and materials list. Many plans offer handy video overviews and guides. Plus, we're proud to offer our plans in both standard and metric. Everything is here, from gorgeous heirloom furniture projects to handy shop projects and upgrades, clever, cost-effective storage solutions, as well as weekend projects and accessories that are great for gifts. All fully searchable and categorized for easy browsing. Woodsmithplans.com, everything you need for building fine woodworking projects.